Okay. Glenn's already like, oh no. All right. It's okay. Oh, okay. Um, so let's dive into stuff here and talk about it a little bit. Right. We're up to 21 other people besides me. I'm feeling pretty good in terms of the course and in terms of the book. So I'm going to go ahead and project some notes here, folks, and get started on talking about the material. So boom, 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 boom. You probably didn't need the boom, 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 but I threw it in for free. Let's see, share application. I'm going to share my screen one. So I'm going to be working in OneNote. Before we get started, I don't think you've had this exposure yet. So, oops, let's see, where am I? I got to get back to my screen where I'm in my home. There we are. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So I'm going to be writing in OneNote, folks, and I'm going to be kind of all over the place. It's just kind of what I, but the word of warning, and you should be aware, I have horrible handwriting. When I'm in class and I've got the whiteboard marker, okay, sounds good. Sorry, losing my double screen feature here. I got to pay attention. Probably should just leave that. Thank you, David. So when I'm in class writing on the board or I'm grading on assignments or whatever it is, it's a torturous thing. However, writing on a screen is probably a little worse, although I think I'm getting better. You may not think that when you see me write on something, but it is in fact getting better. So my handwriting is horrible. Never be afraid to say, what the heck did you just write? Well, you could probably leave the heck part out if you want to be, a little more polite, but you may have to say it because you may be like, I have no idea what any of those words are. It's okay. I understand. Don't think I'll take offense. I get the fact I have horrible handwriting, and this is not helping. In this situation, it's not helping it be any better. Okay. The other part is, as I'll be writing, I'll be moving my screen down a little bit, so I may disappear from view. Not that you're really paying attention to that little me in the bottom corner, but that's what's happening. Okay. So that's kind of a couple, I guess, warnings up front. From there, we'll just dig in. So, folks, and I think Glenn and Will were discussing a little bit about this up front. And Glenn mentioned it. He's had some experience with the course. There's a lot of definition-y type stuff in this course. As a matter of fact, I would say the first 2/3 of this course is getting to understand the language of the statistics, figuring out what they're saying when they mean something, be able to follow up. So that means a couple things. One, this course is not very mathy starting out, right? That'll be like chapters 10 through 15, as I mentioned last class. It gets more mathy as we go. That's not to say we won't be dealing with some percents and some other things along the way, but it doesn't get heavy into math until chapter 10. Up front, it's about understanding what we're talking about when we look at statistics, which is really one of the driving points of JCC's elementary statistics course, getting you comfortable with how to talk about things. The other thing that means is that my expectation is when you're writing to me on the homework, but especially on the graded questions, that you're using the language of the text. Okay. I could think of one example in particular where people describe, I ask them what's wrong with this situation, and people accurately describe to me what's wrong with it, but they're not using the definitions we learned in class, so they don't get full credit. Okay, my expectation is if I'm giving you definitions and I define something and then you use the definition rather than the word, you're probably going to lose a little credit on that. So pay attention to our definitions as we go along. Okay. All right, so let's dig in here. So starting out, right, we have some basic definitions to kind of get us jumping in so we can really discuss things. So first of all, what is statistics, right? And this is a discussion question, right? We've been talking about and hopefully we've been digging into. I think it is. But a couple of quick definitions here are using data to draw a conclusion about something unknown and decision making in the presence of uncertainty. I'm going to torture you all. Somebody not muted? Can somebody mute? I just think somebody's lack of muteness is kind of, there we go. Thank you. Oh, maybe not. Yeah. So can everybody mute for me? Okay. All right. Just because my yeah, it's just you get echoey effects. That's actually why I'm using the headset. Not that you couldn't hear me on my computer, but it causes an echo sometimes, so I'm just minimizing that. Um, so, folks, I know you're going to get tired of this by the end of the course, but let's face it, we're in a perfect time to discuss this type of thing with statistics. And when I say using data to draw a conclusion about something unknown, decision making is the present, decision making in the presence of uncertainty, folks. And we're living that, right? We've been living it, and even though people might be thinking, well, it's winded down a little bit, right? We're in stages of opening, depending on where you are. There seems to be less emphasis on some things, right? We're still in a situation where the country hasn't been before, or at least in any recent time that I'm aware of, where they're trying to determine what are the right moves, right? And you've seen this no matter where you are, and you have your own personal views on it, but everybody does. What's happening at the hopefully at the upper governmental level, and by the CDC, and we know by the World Health Organization as well. Right, everybody's talking about, is the coronavirus going to come back strong in the fall, right? We hear different things. Sometimes one day you hear, this is what's going to happen. 3 days later, you hear, well, no, that's not going to happen. What's happening, folks? Well, okay, first of all, some people are just making it up, but the people that are in the know and that are actually trying to come up with an answer and who may be changing their answer 3 days later, they're doing exactly what this is saying. Okay, they are, right, making decision in the presence of uncertainty. Okay, they're using what data they have to make a decision about what's going to happen. And unfortunately, because we have such an uncertain situation, right, models change. When they talk about these models, right, of the coronavirus, right, though they are using data to try to predict what's going to happen. It's just they don't have as much data as they normally would for these types of situations. And that becomes a problem. I'll share a more personal note at JCC, and I'm not sure I'm supposed to share this or not, but we have a concern right now. Our enrollment, I think all colleges are facing this, our enrollment for the fall semester is down like 15%. That's a lot, right? From where we were, pardon me, had to clear my throat. That's the way they determine that is they look at this date last year, where was enrollment, and where is it this date this year, right? That's what our institutional research department is doing, right? So how do we make up that enrollment? Well, the problem is they're using a model, in my opinion, the problem is they're using a model that doesn't fit our situation, okay? They're using a model that represented last year, the year before that, not a coronavirus year where people are still trying to figure out, am I going to be back to work tomorrow? Am I going to be back to work in a month? Is my schedule going to look differently? Is my job going to look differently? So I am of the view that maybe we shouldn't be using a historical look at data to determine where our enrollment is, because we can't. We don't have the correct situation. We don't have the data to compare year to year because the situation is so dramatic. Glenn, go ahead.
Okay, what if that information that was research department was more of an informational assembly of data for the causality of between last fall and this fall? What if it was, their information wasn't getting mixed up? It wasn't getting biases or biased. It was just information basis.
Yeah, here's where, okay, so, right, Glenn, again, using some terminology we're going to be learning as we go along, right? The problem is our college specifically, and this is happening in many cases, is we're making decisions based on those models, okay? Quite frankly, the college is looking at, and this is where I don't know if I'm supposed to be sharing this, retrenching some positions, which means they're going to reduce the staff, okay? They're going to be letting people go. They're going to be letting people go in July based upon data. And folks, it's not just enrollment. There are other issues going on, right? We're also living in a world where the state funding is changing because of everything that's happened, right? Our economy is weak. And as a result, our state funding may be cut, right? There's other areas besides enrollment that are impacting, right? But in the end, a lack of funding across the country, you have less money, so you're going to be spending less money, and that's all the groups that support JCC. So, yes, it is informational, except we're making decisions based upon it, so it's more than that. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, Glenn, but yeah, we're making decisions based on that data, so that's a tough part. Which again, we have to make decisions, right? You can't stay still or react to that situation, or you end up in a bad place, right? Any decision in terms of retrenchment or those types of things are being made for the health of the college, right? So that it can be a healthy place in terms of finances to fund things. All right, and go ahead, Will.
So my question would be, how does the data compare to, well, two different points. One, the height of the recession, circa 10 years ago. Also, knowing that JCC does rely on a certain amount of military personnel, active duty personnel, as part of its enrollment. How does it compare to other years where leading into the fall semester, a brigade combat team is deployed from Fort Trump? Because when you've got a brigade, that's 3,500 soldiers, that's call it another 4,000 family members roughly who may be in the age range to attend JCC. How many of them leave town either through deployment or moving home and no longer attend JCC? And what does that compare historically?
Okay, so Will's comment, right, is all right, you haven't had a situation like the coronavirus, but you've had other uncertainty, right? There have been other situations where the college has been in flux. How do those compare to this particular year, right? Um, I don't know if we have data for all those years, is the first thing, right? In terms of institutional research, it's a relatively new thing. Might we be able to go back 10 years? Maybe, but I'm not sure we have. In terms of data collection at the college, I would say 10 years ago, we didn't even have an institutional research department, right? That eventually they added a person, everybody's like, institutional research? What? Why are we wasting money on that? And now we're all like, boy, we wish we had that before that. So I think there is limited data, but you could do exactly what you said. I don't know if they're doing it. I know you're shocked that they didn't invite me in on these meetings, that I wasn't brought in as an expert, but they didn't care what I thought. No, I'm just kidding there, folks. As a little joke. But no, I don't know if they're doing that or not. Certainly, the reports they're sending out to the campus are just showing compared year to year. Okay. But you're right, right? Are there other things they could be caring to and or comparing it to? And they could be, but they're not showing that um, to us. To us, they're showing us being the college employees as a whole, right? They're showing us and they appear to be in their discussions with this. They're not hiding this, right? That's why I'm assuming I'm okay to talk about this idea in general, right? Is their full disclosure, right? They're not hiding that this is going on. They're talking to us about what's happening, why they're making decisions, right? There's no uh, retrenchment is always a bad, scary thing, right? But it's not. They're not doing out of malice, right? It's doing out of how do we keep the college healthy. I think that's important to say, right? Folks don't think this is like they're they're doing something bad, right? They're saying how can we keep the college healthy over time, right? That's their role. Um, but yes, so these types of things they may have in play, but they haven't shared those with us. But these are good points, absolutely, right? Are there better comparisons, right? Those type of things. My suggestion was let's compare summer enrollment this year to last year and go from there. Plant more trees. Thank you, Glenn. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So jumping back here. So these things touch our lives, I guess. And there would be an example. Um, and certainly, I'm sure I know other colleges are doing similar things, but I'm sure it's not just colleges, right? Businesses, they're all doing similar things. We've all been told the economy is not going to be the same when it starts coming back. Um, And I would say, hopefully, the ones making decisions about people's jobs are doing this type of research, right? They're trying to make some type of explanation. Yep, other educational, absolutely, right? And by the way, it's not just at the higher education level, right? It's K through 12. The governor's has not hid his concern right out of the gate. If we don't have money, we can't fund our education, and that's where cuts are going to have to come. So that's a K through 12 and college level issue. But hopefully, again, things will turn around and we'll get there. But definitely some realistic examples of trying to make decisions in the presence of uncertainty, which I kind of sidetracked a little bit more, but just to give you some, again, real connection to it. The next thing, what are data? It kills me to say that, but the plural of data is data, actually, and the singular of data is datum, but nobody ever says datum. Occasionally, somebody who wants to look smart says datum, but I've never said it because I try not to look smart. You've probably figured that out by now. But data are pieces of information or numbers that have a meaning attached to them. Folks, people look at numbers and they say, all right, that's data. No, no, no. Right? Data has each one of those numbers we look at, or each one of those pieces of information we look at, has a meaning to it. So if I was looking at the average height of the people in this class, so very generic, but it gets the point across, the average height of people in this class, the pieces of data I would collect are people's heights, and we'll talk about measurement later in the course in terms of do you do inches or centimeters, whatever. But for right now, right, the piece of data is not just 57, right? It's 57 inches, right? There's some meaning to attach to that particular piece of data. To step away from kind of a basic example, I wanted to take you out to Gallup, which is one of the bigger polling, I don't know if it's first or second, it might be first, largest polling groups in the United States and probably in the world. I haven't checked lately, but I'm going to guess yes. They're one of many polling groups out there. I would say this, they're not necessarily, the problem is because we do live in a world of data, each political side has their own polling companies. And shockingly, and we'll talk about this bias idea, I think Glenn mentioned it a few minutes ago, the bias that can come into play here is that when you have an agenda, it's an amazing thing how when you do research, the information that results in that supports your agenda. Okay, well, it's not amazing, really, right? It's inherent bias. Yeah, it blows your mind, right? So one of the things people often do is hire a group like Gallup, and that's how they make their money, right? They're hired to provide input consultant wise, and they do that by researching things in a legitimate polling world. Okay, so if you're watching an MSNBC poll or a Fox News poll, I'll be picking on those two throughout the course just because those are the left and right groups, right? Those probably aren't the polls you want to necessarily look at to determine if something's accurate. Okay, we'll talk about some of the many polling companies out there. We'll start with Gallup. So I'm just going to switch over. Let's see, you're on the wrong page. So I'm going to bring it to the page I'm on. No, I'm just going to change the page. Give me a moment. Sorry, I got a couple screens going on here, and the page I'm on is not the page I need to be on. So I'll go to screen 2. That's where it is right now. So I just went out to Gallup.com. I know what you're thinking, right? Crazy talk. Gallup has kind of reorganized its approach to things, so it's a little harder to find just some statistics to play around with. But if you look at what we do, right, you can see they definitely are driving home what they do. Create an environment where employees and teams excel, right? Make accurate decisions to ensure long-term success. These sound like corporate culture things if I've ever heard them, right? Corporations, they want corporations to hire them to provide information to improve whatever the situation is they want to do. Boost performance by maximizing, right? Bunch of buzzwords. But what I went down to was, let's look at what's in the news for them, okay? And then I clicked around. You can see that bunch of stuff. Obviously, COVID's still around. They have this running, right? Approval rating of the president. This is always here. Okay. Um, you can see it's May 1st to the 13th. So in today's world, that's a changing thing. Okay. But I clicked around here. Right, you could click around at your own convenience, but I just wanted to find something that I could use. So I spotted this. It was relatively recent. So use of low contact commerce climbs in U.S. during pandemic. So what they did was they did some research. You can see they have a highlight, right? But I just came down here. So low contact services. I'm like, I think I know what that means, but I didn't know for sure. So I don't deny it. I looked it up on Google, right? Just meaning minimizing your touching of things when you go to shopping or go to a restaurant, right? Like obviously you can't eat it in a restaurant, but even when you're ordering, right, you're ordering in advance, showing up, they're handing you your food already ready, you're paying for it and you're leaving. Okay, a lot of restaurants doing that type of thing. And a lot of shopping, although I think some of them all had it already, a lot more shopping, like Walmart, you can do pickup, right? You put in your order electronically, drive up, and they load it in your car. So there's been a lot more of that, is what this is about. But coming back to our notes here, right, in terms of some of the ideas we're talking about, okay, is these are statistics, right? These are, in this case, percentages. They don't always have to be a percentage, right? But these are percentages of to represent the situation. So Americans increased adoption of low contact services during coronavirus. And you can see, folks, this is spectacular when you can get it, right? Longitudinal data is absolutely spectacular. That's what the college was using, right, in terms of making decisions. Again, it's a little weird, but these are a much more, you can see, smaller and more recent time frames that they're doing. Okay, so picked up takeout from a restaurant, right? You can see how that has, and they did polling to find this information. They asked people the question. You can see how that's increased. Curbside pickup at a store, right? So if I'm trying to decide if I'm a company or a restaurant or a store or whatever, should I be looking into this? Well, if this is an increasing market and I'm a store that doesn't offer curbside pickup, I better be finding a way to do that. That's what this is showing me. Because people are using it in this increased method, and if I'm not doing it, I'm not providing. I'm losing out on a market, right? That would be the idea here. So these are the statistics I would have, right? 36%. The data they came up with here was whether or not people use curbs pickup or whatever we may have. So I hear a couple of comments. I don't know if they're Janelle there. Adaptation as though people had a choice. Yes. Adoption. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and be aware this they're not trying to, right, there's not a political agenda here. What they are doing is, and that's again, hopefully Gallup does this as true as anybody, is that they're just telling you what the information they have, right? They're telling you this is what happens. And they're not telling you this is why or you had a choice, right? Their goal here is to just tell you 36% are doing curbside pickup. You can go into a store. You're right, restaurants, you're stuck there. But curbside pickup at a store, right? That's people would prefer not to go in. Okay, so again, if I'm not somebody who offers that, I'm going to consider offering it. Right? There's not an agenda in what they're offering, I guess, in terms of information. But could there be? Absolutely. Um, okay, so Will's question or comment, and sorry, I had to jump back and forth. Doesn't why matter? Okay, so it depends on what you're using it for. Okay. This is, and Glenn mentioned earlier, the idea of causation, folks. And causation is something we're going to get to much later in the course. It's one of our last things we discuss because of its important pieces here. Sorry, I just realized my phone wasn't on silent. Let me silent that. Okay. But yes, causation can be important. However, I don't think that's what they're necessarily looking at here, because this is always where you get in trouble. Assumed causation might be coronavirus, right? Okay. All right. Okay, a lot of good stuff happening. I'm going to keep going though, and let you folks talk it out, because I can't keep back here. Okay. Keep going back because it's confusing me. Sorry. So, but get some good comments going on there, and maybe some bad ones too. I don't know. I'll have to watch you guys. Oh, is that my raise your hand thing? Yeah. Will, what are you doing?
So my
What are you doing?
question with that data point was actually if like it looks like a national poll, right?
Yes, I'm going to guess. I mean, folks, this is Gallup, so if I slide down to the bottom here, right, they have their survey methods, right? This is a real polling company with, right, here's how they came about this, right? You can go through, but yes, the answer is yes, it does appear to be. Go ahead. Will.
So when you ask that for a national poll, and one of the big trends I would look at is the change between April and May of having groceries delivered, and that number stayed steady between the two. Again, without reading some of these other things, takeout from restaurant, ordering food from a restaurant, um, is because people are sick and tired of eating the same food at home. I know
Right.
I know
Yep.
without being part of this set, I know at my house, we eat out more now than we did pre coronavirus
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
we're tired of seeing each other's faces or cooking.
Yes, I get it.
So we're ordering more food, but that doesn't necessarily translate into it's COVID specifically. It's more you're stuck in a house, you don't want to cook anymore. But the groceries delivered staying solid says a certain number of people said this is how many people are going to do it, and that number is not going to change too much anymore based on this. The second two data points are almost a month apart.
Yeah, so you're looking here. Yeah, and be aware again, folks. They're not this. You're right. They're not implying that this is that this is the coronavirus that's causing this, right? At least I didn't read the text, so I guess it's not. But here it says during coronavirus crisis. It's saying during these moments, this is what's happening, right? There, it could very well be exactly what you're talking about, right? You're tired of cooking home. You just want some type of getting out, or again, maybe you don't want to see people's faces. I don't know. Um, they're saying this is what's happening right now. Do what you want with this, right? And obviously, as things, this is going to be something that changes. They're going to be showing these over the next few months as well. So I don't think, I guess causation is important. And what you're describing could be considered what we call lurking variables. Another piece we're going to be discussing in the course. Definitely important. Um, but I think it's just in terms of what Gallup's doing. This is more, here's what's happening, right? They're not trying to say, again, I'm going to guess that, right? It's because of Corona, right? They're saying it's what's happening during Corona. Again, just my impression at a glance. I didn't take a close look. Okay. All right. Okay, so hopefully that addressed what you're saying, Will. But yeah, folks, you are bringing up awesome points that we need to address in this course, but I don't want to skip too far ahead, just because I want to get some basic language down before we start talking about some of those other, again, very important pieces that we just aren't quite to yet. So let me jump out of here again. We go back to our course, get rid of that craziness there, and jump over to my notes again. And now I'm back here. Okay. All right. So let me kind of move us down a little bit. So more definitions. So we did data, we did what are statistics, but a couple more pieces. Folks, variable is going to run throughout this course. I'm going to give you specific types of variables. It's going to be a common element throughout. But before we do that, okay, so some quick definitions when I'm using them. Individuals are the objects described by a set of data. They may be people, but they could be animals and other things. So with what we were just looking at, right, the individuals in that particular study were people, right? They were asking adults, and I think I read, I'm not going to skip back there, but I read that I remember reading they were adults there. Okay, so in the previous example, we're talking about adults in the U.S., right? That would be the question is we're talking about all Americans. So individuals are the items you're looking at. Yep. Okay. Thank you for looking, Janelle. Yep. Age 18, right? And I'm sure that they have their survey methodology. We're going to get deep into survey methodology as the course progresses. But again, I'm just trying to get us some understanding early on. I'm just showing you some more advanced stuff, and it's prompting all these awesome thoughts that you guys are having. And they are awesome, folks. You're really thinking and providing some, you're addressing things that we absolutely are going to be addressing in this course because it's important. And the other definition before I jump to my Oreo study down below. A variable is any characteristic of an individual. A variable takes different values from different individuals. So for what we were just looking at, right, the individuals were age 18 and up adults in the United States. Those were the individuals. The variable is whether they go out to eat, whether they use curbside pickup, right? Those types of things. Each one of those elements that we're getting information about, those are the variables, right? Do you do this, yes or no? So it takes on a different value based on who the person is or the individual is. That would be the example from that previous one. The one I do want to show here, because what I found when I talk about these two topics is people struggle breaking away from individuals as people. And I'll tell you right now, one of the most interesting things is people when it comes to studies and opinions, and it's one of the most common things you're going to have to address. But there are plenty of other examples of individuals. And from a discussion I had from Will during the open house, I know he could probably list tons of different areas that he's done studies with where the individuals are not people, but they're elements of racing. Okay. But dogs and cats have options too. Thank you, Glenn. Standing up for the dogs and cats, right? So, but again, I think because we focus on it here a lot, and it seems very natural to focus on people. I wanted to give us an example of something where the individuals weren't people. So I went and grabbed this, and it's on this other screen, so I got to do it again. Yep, there he is BMW comment again. Thanks, Will. Let me jump back here. I just have to share the other screen again. I probably should come up with a better way to do it, but I probably won't, so maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course they have opinions. I wouldn't argue with that, Glenn. Not with a crazy person, anyways. That was a little joke. I don't know if we came across there. Hopefully it came across. Okay, we there? All right. Hopefully you folks are seeing this thing here, this big Oreo and getting hungry for Oreos. The Oreo high school experiment. Double and mega stuff filling doesn't add up. This is one of those, folks, this is not a scientific study. This is just a fun one that was done. And you can see it's a really old study, but I like it because, again, it identifies these particular groups. So I'm going to slide on down here. So Oreo lovers have long debated how to eat them. Twisted, dunked, cream first, or bite whole. I don't know. Blah, 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 blah. But most have never calculated just how stuffed Oreos are until now. A high school math teacher in upstate New York tasked his students to find out, I'm sorry for reading to you, just how much stuff is in each type of Oreo. Original, double, and mega. Okay. They explained how they did it. Right, go through all this. So double stuff, not really. Try 1.86 times the stuff of a regular Oreo. Mega stuff, try it. So the implication is, right, that double stuff is not actually double, right? It's 1.86 times. That's what they're studying here. And they go on to talk about this. It's a very fun story. There's another comment about a subway situation that made headlines a few years ago. And let's face it, there's some cute dogs off to the side here, so don't look at those. But the goal here is let's take a look at those items from our page, which I guess I can't bring directly up at the same time without a lot of work, so I'm not going to. But on our notes, the individuals. So they took a look here. What are the individuals? Somebody throw it out there in this particular study. What would you think the individuals are based on our definition? All right, I got to slide over and see what's going on over here. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. Yeah, Oreos, exactly. Thank you. Yep, the Oreos are our individuals. Okay, the original, double, and mega, right? Those are our individuals in this particular study. So not people, again, giving it cookies, and what a tempting way that is. Yep. So those are our individuals in the case. What's the variable? I like this, typing it in the, switch to subs. Glenn, nice. Wait, would double, regular, and mega be the variables? Okay, so Oreos, right, are the individuals. It's the amount of cream that I think is the variable, correct? Right? Oh, I just answered the question I was going to ask. Nice, Janelle, you tricked me. Very smooth. But yes, so the variable here is how much cream they have. Okay. No, it's okay. I'm just picking on you. Right? No, it was a good observation. Right? So when we're looking at what they're studying how much stuff there is. So the amount of stuff, that's the variable they're looking at. It's the characteristic, again, the element they're looking at in the Oreo cookies. So Oreos would be your individuals. And you could categorize them as the three types, but Oreo I think is fine. And the variable here would be the amount of cream. Or sorry, stuff, right? That's what they call it, stuff. One other quick comment on this. So by the way, the sub one actually I think made some headlines, right? If you look that one up, right? About their foot long is not a foot long, right? It was a whole big deal about that. Let's see, oh, here we go. I did want to point this out. This is just a side note. While I'm not familiar with what was done in the classroom setting, I can confirm for you that a recipe for the Oreo double stuffed cookies has double the stuff or cream filling when compared to our base or original cookie. So this is from the Oreo spokeswoman. So what happened here, folks, was a high school class did this, and apparently it made the news, and it elicited a response from Oreo, right? An Oreo spokesperson, literally, what, a Nabisco, is that who they are? I don't know. Came out and had to respond to that because that was making headlines. And it was making headlines in a way that they actually had to come out and say it, right? They're caught, yeah, sorry, just reading the chat. Okay. Yeah, so these are all comments. Here's here is the thing, folks. Right? If you disagree with a study, right? And this is a comment that we'll be discussing, another piece we'll be discussing as we progress through the course. If you disagree with what a study says, your initial reaction is to poke holes in it. So I'm going to bring us back for just a moment to talk about this. All right, your initial reaction is to poke holes in the methodology and who did it, right? You want somebody who's an expert, not a class. Why would a class be allowed to do this? Right? Why would we trust a high school class? Okay. Oh boy, shouldn't have showed you stuff about food. That was my bad. But that's immediately what the spokesperson did. I don't know what they did in the classroom setting, right? She said that in there. Now you might say, well, she was just responding to that. No, she could have said, I don't know what they were doing in the study. She specifically said classroom setting to point out these are students, right? They're not research scientists. Their opinions can't be trusted. That's the implication there. Folks, we live in that world now, right? People will shoot down any opinion that goes against their own. As a result, when you're doing research, you have to try to anticipate these things and justify them. I don't know. Yeah, I skipped lunch too, Glenn. I'm feeling a little hungry myself. I don't know if you're familiar, but JCC has a small research group called the Center for Community Studies. And what they do is they find out information about the Jefferson County, Lewis County, and now St. Lawrence County a little bit. They do research for them specifically, so they get specific information about local. They have an annual survey, but different groups in the community, nonprofits, hire them to do research about the community for them. Okay, they've been doing it for a while now. I believe they're well thought of in the community. But every time they release an annual survey, or they have to go present on a survey to a group, like they're presenting to the Jefferson County Board of Legislators on the survey, right? They have to go in prepared. When they meet with the newspaper, they have to go in prepared because all those people have agendas. And if a number from the survey disagrees with their agenda, they're going to want you to support why or how you came to that result and is it really legitimate. Okay, and even if it is, they'll still argue with you. This is one of the challenges of statistics. So knowing your material, knowing your methodology, and doing a good job, and being perceived as an expert are all helpful pieces beyond just finding that particular piece. Yes, exactly. Discredit, right? But they're doing it gently, right? Say in the class, right? But they certainly don't want that getting out there, especially being that the subway thing happened before and it did turn into a to-do. They didn't want to make it. They didn't want it to explode, but they didn't want it to neglect it either. So, all right. So that's just some Oreo stuff. I just like to bring that one up because again, it shows you individuals that are not necessarily um, people. Okay. So I'm bringing this back now. Hopefully, there we go to notes. God, bring me back to sanity here. What? How long have I been rambling on? 45 minutes, and I haven't even made it. This is why it takes a long time to do notes. Okay. All right. So when you're doing research, one of the first questions you have to ask, or if somebody's going to do research, and I'll tell you right now, the person that kind of runs the Center for Community Studies, there's a few of them, but they're my colleagues in the math department. I'm an amateur statistician. In reality, my degree's in mathematics, okay, where I've taken statistics. These particular individuals have degrees in statistics, so much more in-depth experience. So I would be an amateur statistician versus their more professional level. As a result, I tend to rely on them and learn a lot from them. It's an awesome experience. So one of the things they've made clear to me is when they help people design surveys, they find people come in with the questions they want to ask and and all this stuff, but they don't necessarily know what they're actually trying to determine. And that they spend the first hour of the first meeting with individuals on what do you actually want to know? Don't give me questions. Don't give me other information. Don't give me reports. Tell me what you're trying to determine, because that's going to tell us what data to collect. Don't tell us what you want to ask, because what you might want to ask is not going to match up. And having said that, it is a horrible experience in statistics to execute a study that doesn't get results, that the results come back inconclusive and you don't know what they're saying, or they're answering a question that you didn't ask because you didn't think this through. Folks, there aren't redos in these. I take it back. There are redos, but if you want to spend another $5,000 doing a study. But as a general rule, you can't look back after you get the results and say, oh, we should have asked this question. It doesn't go well. It can be a very frustrating moment. There are two larger ways to collect data. Okay, folks? So I want to discuss those. The first one are observational studies. Okay, observational studies are ways to collect data without adding a control. And you can see down below the other approach is doing an experiment. We're going to talk about both of these in much more detail as the course progresses. An observational study is you observe individuals and measure variables of interest, but do not attempt to influence the responses. You don't influence them in any way. You don't have them do something. You describe some group or situation. So an observational study that we just looked at is the Oreo study, right? They didn't try to influence the Oreos. They literally just went, bought some Oreos, whatever, they scraped off the stuff, weighed it, right? That's an observational study. They interacted, okay? So be careful here. They interacted with their subjects, right? They interacted with their individuals. You have to do that. But they didn't control the amount of stuff on it. They were observing. They scraped it off, weighed it. That's an observation, okay? Or however they went about it. I assume that's what they did, right? So that's what an observational study. These are very common. The most common type. So, folks, this is a subcategory, but it's so important that I'm going to bring it off to the side. Sorry, I'm going to come off to the side here and draw this out. Okay. So, again, there are two types, main types, observational that says observation up to trust me, versus your experiments. A subcategory of observation, so this is observational, is a sample survey, which we will deal with a lot. Okay. A sample survey is where you go out and you survey a bunch of people about something to collect their stuff, their stuff, their information. Okay. This is so common, folks, that we often separate it out from observational. We'll say, is this, and you'll see it in your book for your homework, is this a sample survey, observational, or experiments? Folks, this is a subcategory. What the point is, sample surveys are their own little subcategory, but they're so prevalent, they're so important that they're going to want you to differentiate. Is it a general observational study? So I'm scraping off the stuff and just weighing it. Or are you seeking stuff through a survey? Folks, why surveys? Why are surveys so important? Surveys are so important because you're generally collecting information that you can't collect by observation. Are you going to vote for Donald Trump in the next presidential election? You can't look at somebody, well, hopefully you're not looking at somebody and saying, that person's voting for Donald Trump just by looking at them, right? You're asking an opinion. So sample surveys, you're collecting information from about stuff that you can't readily view. It's still observational because you're not trying to affect their opinion, right? You're just collecting the information. So it still meets the observational, but again, it's not something you can just look at and grab. It's something you have to actually go and ask the question for. I did see. Jason's providing stuff. Okay, so let's see. I'm just checking out chat for a minute. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, yep. I'm not, Jason. I'm not sure what you're hitting on there. With that, you're welcome to log in and let me know. I just wasn't able to collect enough information. Go ahead.
No, I'm just being facetious, really.
Oh, thanks. That always adds to a class. All right. Okay, I just didn't want to leave you hanging on that if you did want to mention something. So, folks, coming back now. So sample surveys are a subcategory, but again, they'll often list them out separately. Now, sorry, let me talk about, if I had done a class survey with you, if I had come in and I said, what are your majors? If I'd given you a survey, what are your majors? How many credit hours have you completed, right? What's your career goal, right? If I ask each one of you those questions, so I did a little class survey, which I sometimes do, but didn't do with you folks. Probably should have. We won't talk about that though. If I had given you that survey, though, then that would be an observational study, again, specifically a sample survey. I'm collecting information about you that I wouldn't readily have available to you. Okay, that would be an example of that. An experiment, on the other hand, is where you deliberately impose. So you are having some people use some type of what we call treatment on individuals in order to observe their responses. This happens a lot in psychology, a lot in medicine, right? These are areas where they do a lot of experiments. Right now, right, the vaccine search, right, the whole, I don't know what the name of that one drug that has a long name that people thought it might actually have a positive impact and then was proven otherwise, right? That stuff is done through clinical trials, which are medical experiments. Again, another piece we'll have coming up in maybe chapter 5 or chapter 6. I can't remember where they get in the clinical trials. So we'll get into all that a little bit deeper as the course goes on. This is kind of an intro. There you go. That's it, Will. And even if I see it, I still couldn't say it. Hydro, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So there were several experiments there. Yeah, Janelle, to answer your question, yes, there was a, right, what happened was there was some early research that suggested it might be something that could help. And then when the research was brought into a larger sample, again, some more terms we have coming up, it was realized it didn't have the smaller group. There might have been something else in that smaller group that had the impact, right? And that's one of the challenges of medical experiments that we'll discuss a bit later on, right? But that it would be an example of an experiment. So the idea of deliberately imposing some treatment, right? Making somebody do something, perhaps eating healthy, right? Does eating healthy? No, that's not a good one. Does exercise lower people's cholesterol? No, I would guess yes, but I don't necessarily know that that's a hard and fast rule, right? If I'm still eating crazy, would exercise necessarily help my cholesterol level? Okay, so that would be an example of imposing it. So I might take some people with similar cholesterol or similar lifestyles, right, and say, all right, you're going to start exercising. You're not going to exercise, so I'm going to make that happen. I think Will is very excited. He's got a good example. Raise his hand and wrote it over there. So Will, share away.
So a great example of an experiment would be driving
Sorry.
the same model car on the same section of road at different gears. So a manual transmission 99 Honda Civic. We've all seen one of them. You drive it in first, second, third, fourth gear at 30 miles an hour and determine how much fuel was burned over that 1 mile stretch of road you drive. Now, that would give you an experiment where you deliberately would get a response to the action inputted.
Oh, Will, I love it. Right, you're almost using some of the specific types of variables, response, right, input, right. Those things are where, yes, absolutely. You're just hitting great terminology here that we're gonna tackle on. But exactly, you're doing something, right? Imposing a treatment, but you're doing something to test out and see what the difference is in these things. Exactly, right? That's exactly what an experiment is. And you use that information to draw a conclusion. Perfect. Yeah, and there again, the response idea. Now, aspirin. So this is where I appreciate your comment, Will, because I'm using another people person one, right? An actual medical experiment, right? Versus so pigeonholing us into people. So that was a good one that's not people. There was an aspirin study done, and I don't have the year, but I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. It's a famous aspirin study where they wanted to see if low dose aspirin could have a positive impact on people with heart disease. Okay. So they selected a group of people, or about probably there's some more they selected, but they got people to participate in an experiment where they had a lot of similarities, right? High risk of heart disease, and they had them, half of them take what a baby aspirin, right? Low dose aspirin every day, and then the other half just went about regular life, right? They didn't have them do that. They probably had them take a placebo, is probably what they had to do, but we're a little early to talk about placebos as well. I know I'm tempting you with all this cool stuff later on. It's coming. But the idea of the aspirin, so the goal is, would aspirin have that positive impact? What they found is, as the experiment went on, people who had people who, I just saw Glenn's angry face, or I don't know, whatever face it is. People who took the low dose aspirin had statistically significantly, fewer heart disease ailments or incidents. So strokes, right, heart attacks, all those types of things. It was so effective that they stopped the trial and actually published the data so that they could get those people on. And we'll talk about data ethics and those types of things later on. But right, the idea with an experiment is it has to be something that you think is going to help people, that has some type of reason why it would be helpful, but it's not something that would be so blatantly helpful that why would we even do research on it, right? Those types of things. Glenn, did you put a weird face for a reason, or were you just playing around? Whoa. Oh, Will's driving his BMW again. There we go. So a good comment there. All right, I'll assume Glenn's not really angry, but maybe he is. So, advocate for vocab. Vocab rules the world. How's that? Okay. Sorry, folks. If I look like my mouse is going a little crazy, it's because sometimes I'm looking at the video screen that I'm pushing, and sometimes I'm looking at the actual screen I'm working on. But if I try to work it on the video screen where I'm recording, it's not in the same place, so I have to pay more attention. That's just me being like, okay, which screen am I really on? So with that, all right, here's my question. Feel free to drop an answer in the chat room here. Which do you think would be better if you had a choice between an observational study? Again, it could be a sample survey, right? But you could just say observational study, or an experiment. Which of those do you think would be better to do if you had a choice? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the situation forces one or the other. Which is better? Which one do you think makes sense to be better, the experiment or the observational study? Depends on the answers wanted. All right, let's work on the assumption that we want something that's going to be accurate. So again, step away from depends on the study of what you're studying, because I get it. Sometimes you can only do observational. Sometimes you can only do experimental. Let's assume it's something where we could do both, and we have a choice between them. So I'm seeing, yeah, but and definitely, folks, there are absolutely situations where you can only do observational. You can only do experimental. The only things that make sense there. But if you have a choice, okay, so it's kind of across the board a little bit. And here's the thing, right? Here's the thing about all this. It depends on your resources a little bit. Again, if I have a choice and I have the resources for it and the time for it, so I guess time is a resource, folks, the better thing here is the experiment. Okay, the experiment is better because you're deliberately imposing a treatment. You have what we call control over things. You have more control. And as a result, some of those outside influences have less a chance of impacting the situation. Okay, versus an observational situation, you don't have as much control, so there could be other things happening in affecting the results. Observational would be clearly cheaper and easier, though, right, if you had a choice. So if you're thinking about your resources and not using them, observational is better. But if you're trying to get to a true answer and your resources are unlimited, even though that never happens, experiment will give you a better answer, be more exact, I think Jason said, right? So it's experimental, again, whenever that's a possibility. Sometimes it's not a possibility. And again, sometimes you're limited again by resources. Okay. And ethics. You do get limited by ethics as well, right? You get a more accurate response. Yeah, that's good. That's good, Becca. So just keep that in mind, folks. If you have a choice, experiment's the way to go.
And there's a chapter on ethics.
Yep, we're going to do ethics too. Yep. We have all sorts of, and this is where I feel bad for Glenn, right? This is the introductory chapter where we're kind of talking about, this is what we're going to talk about in this course. Here's some introduction to language, but there's so much more to all these things. And even those of you that haven't taken or had some experience with the course, right, are already clicking into that, right? Causation and other stuff you mentioned to go along. It's all coming. Don't worry. Okay. So let's see here. Let's wrap up chapter 1 here with, let's see what I got left this part. Just got to watch time. It's getting a little later. Okay. With population versus sample, folks. This is one of the most challenging part of statistics because to some people there's some elements here that don't seem logical. Okay. They defy their ability to people's ability to understand why it works. So population versus sample, folks. Definitions first. The population in a statistical study is the entire group of individuals about which we want information. So if the population was this class, then I'd be wanting information from all of you. Okay? If the population is, as we looked at for that low contact survey at the beginning from Gallup, right, it was all adult Americans, right? That was their population, all adult Americans. All American adults, that probably sounds better. Yes, exactly. So in the Oreo study, all Oreos ever made is the population, right? All Oreos is the population. The sample, on the other hand, were the Oreos that they looked at in the course. Okay, and when they were in their math class, the Oreos that they took and literally scraped the stuff off and weighed. That was their sample. Folks, good sampling is a very in-depth piece of this, and we're going to study it in this course. Okay, but right now we're just talking about sampling in general. The idea is you take part of the population from which you want to collect information and draw conclusions based or draw conclusions using the sample about the population. Okay, so if I wanted to find out information about the class, so you folks, I would just ask all of you, right? Why would I do a sample of whatever 28 individuals when I could just ask 28 individuals? Okay, so I would just ask you all, and you can see at the bottom here, there's a word down here, census. Okay, if I ask all of you about something and you all respond, that's census. I'm checking with everybody. However, if you're like that low contact thing we looked at earlier, you can't contact all adult Americans to find a result, to find out what they think. So you use the sample, and we would use a sample survey to get their opinion. So a census is when you ask everybody. A sample survey is when you talk to the sample. Folks, if you're trying to find out information about a large population, again, all adults in the United States will be one. You're going to use a sample to find that. How you select that sample is important, and we're going to discuss that because you want to discuss or select a good sample. Folks, if you select a good sample, then you can reasonably accurately represent the population's views with a much smaller group. And that's where some people struggle with logic, right? They want to, my colleagues in the center struggle with this with some of the county board of legislators when they're chatting, and they say, well, you only asked 600 people in the county. How can that represent the thousands of people that are there? And they have to explain sampling techniques and that type of stuff to them. But they don't understand the logic of it. And it's okay, right? It's not as intuitive as it would be. But a sample, if done well, can reasonably well represent the population. Again, we'll talk about all those things. So you have to ask yourself when you're going to do your research, is a sample survey make sense or does a census make sense? If it's a huge population, I'm going to use a sample survey. If it's a small group that I have easy access to, a census makes sense. Folks, the census represents the population, or again, you're going to ask everybody the population. So a census is going to be more accurate, right? If you're asking everybody the population versus doing a sample and then checking it out, right? There's definitely a difference there in accuracy, right? Census is going to be accurate. This is going to be an approximation. Okay. By the way, I don't know if you watch YouTube at all, but my children watch a lot of YouTube, and I'm generally watching it with them. And there's a lot of the commercials going on right now, or the adverts, as my kids call them, are about the U.S. Census, right? Because we're in a U.S. Census year, right? Telling you you probably got it in the mail, right? You probably are hearing stuff about all over the place. We're in a U.S. Census year. Census is every 10 years, right? And that's the United States government asking information about every person in the United States. They're trying to get information about every person in the United States. It's a huge task, right? They start off by sending you something in the mail, fill out, send it back. Then the people that don't do that. And eventually it gets down to phone calling door to door, right? Trying to get information, right? And funding on programs and such like that do depend. If you watch the commercial, the commercials look a little sketchy because they're like overly cheerful about doing the census. But the census is important to get support for different programs in your areas and like that, how federal funding is distributed and those types of things. The other plus it gives us is it gives us information about our country, right, as a whole. And be aware, this is an inordinate amount. I don't even know what inordinate means, but it fits here. Inordinate amount of information they collect. It's not easy to sift through that. It takes years, right? They don't do a census every year, not because they don't want data every year. It takes years for them to sift through data, even in today's world, to be able to provide information. I don't think we could comprehend how many pieces of data they collect total by the end. By the way, the census, the U.S. Census does have a site. I think it's census.gov. We'll look at it later in the course. It's got great information if you're trying to find out just general statisticky type stuff. Okay. Wrapping up, what have I got? Like 2 minutes? I didn't leave time for questions, but wrapping up chapter 1 here. The class survey could be a good indicator of some things, but not others. Let's take a look at why. Okay. So this is where the population is important. If I'm trying to determine information about the people in this class and I ask you, you're obviously a great indicator. If I'm trying to draw conclusions about students at Jefferson, you might be an indicator or you might not be. If I'm trying to draw conclusions about all college students in the United States, you might be a good sample, you might not be. Depending on what the population is you're looking at, you folks can go from an exceptional indicator to a poor indicator, right? Not all students take summer classes. So as a result, just by being here, you may not be the typical student. And we'd be leaving those people out. So if we were trying to look at even JCC students, right, you may not be a good example, or you may not be representative. That's the word. I should say good example. That doesn't sound good. But you may not be representative of people, students at Jefferson, just because you're taking summer classes and not all of them do. So pay attention. The sample is important, and we're going to talk about the methodology. But make sure you're paying attention to what your population is as well, because the sample has to represent that population well and in as many ways as possible to get good information. And again, that's that part you have to do exceptionally well if you want this to be accurate. If you want the sample to represent the population, you have to make sure that you're taking your sample in a way that it does that. All right, I'll get off my pedestal here. I'm going to stop sharing there as soon as I realize what screen I'm on again. Got to go to the right. In my defense, my two screens are usually next to each other, but with the space I have now, they're the ones to the right behind. So when I have to go to the right to go behind it, it's weird. But anyways, all right, let's wrap this up. Okay, so folks, that's what I have for today. So remember, 2 days from now, you've got your first homework assignment due. That's on it's just that introductory assignment. Then bonus assignment on the 10th. I will see you. What day will I see you next? What's the calendar look like here? I will see you, I guess, on the 9th. So I will see you before the chapter 1 homework is due. But I've just went over chapter 1. I'm done with it. So feel free to give that a try before we meet again. That way you can ask any questions you have when we start up class next time. Okay? You're all good to go. However, if you have questions, feel free to hang around. I know I got to check on something for Becca, but feel free to hang around if you want to ask a question. But I think we're good for the day. I appreciate your attention, and I'm going to stop recording at this point.